we're in the middle of a series of talks, which is looking at the path of the Bodhisattva. So, what we're looking at, so the Bodhisattva is a being who has taken on to become enlightened, to go to the beyond for the benefit of all beings. And the Bodhisattva, Bodhi means awake, Sattva means being. So it's somebody who is committed to awakening for the benefit of all beings. So not just for themselves, but for all of us, for all sentient beings. And it's a very beautiful idea that came out of some of, of Buddhism, known as the Bodhisattva ideal. So we're looking at that. And what we're doing is we're looking at a kind of guidebook to training ourselves to become as full of kindness as we can, full of wisdom, as full of energy. It's a guidebook that helps us to wake up to reality, to wake up to how things really are, and to see reality for ourselves. And it suggests we do that because it's the best thing that we can do for ourselves, and it's the best thing that we can do for other people. So this guidebook is called the Bodhicharyavatara, and it was written by someone called Shantideva, who was a monk in medieval times in India. And it's a bit of a kind of like, it's a guidebook, it's a self-help book, you might even say, from those times, or a self and other help book, you might say. And it gives us a ways that we can grow and we can develop. And he recommends practices which are called the paramitas, can be translated as perfection, can be translated as going beyond ourselves, going beyond to something much more magical. And hopefully, so there's a list of 10 practices. Okay, and if you do social media a lot, or if you read magazines, these would be described in a sort of social media in a magazine as being something like 10 miracle ways to change your life and save the world. And you'd immediately click on it and think, wow, I must know what those are. So we're looking at them in a series, and we've looked at generosity, ethics, forbearance, and we've got to energy. And then we've got loads more to go through, but today we're looking at energy or Virya. Aha, yes, it's good. It's very complicated flip chart technology went on there, and it works. So Virya. So Virya means energy for the good. And we're about to have, this is the first talk, I'm going to be introducing the idea of Virya or energy. And then we'll have talks, next 3 or 4 talks are also about that as well. So what is Virya? And I'm going to use the word Virya because it has a specific meaning. What is Virya, and why would we want to train in it? Why would we need to train in it if what we want to do is become a bodhisattva, if what we want to do is become much kinder, much more aware, much more in touch with reality? So, well, Virya is interesting because actually it has it's a Sanskrit word, and it has the same root as some words in English now. I think Sanskrit and Latin and Greek must be joined in some way, because sometimes words have the same roots. And it's related to vigour. It's related to virtue, okay, which is interesting, because actually what we're talking about here is energy, so vigour, and virtue, energy for the good. So it's not just energy for anything at all. It's energy for something that it's the pursuit of the good. And, well, we do need energy. Without it, we wouldn't get anywhere at all if we didn't have some energy. So if you've remember back to your introductory class, course, you'll remember we talked about the gap. So the gap is the place on that cycle where we can change. The gap is the point where we can change. But in order to do that, it needs loads of energy, doesn't it? Because you need to be with whatever's going on and take a different path than we normally do. And that takes quite a lot of virya. If we're practicing ethics, we need virya. We'll find that there are times when we kind of want to go and do what we used to do, the old ways of doing things. You know, maybe not be that kind to somebody, not be generous, those kind of things. And we actually have to apply some energy, some virya, in order to take the ethical path. Meditation needs virya. Just getting out of bed in the morning needs quite a lot of virya sometimes. And, you know, putting ourselves in good conditions, like going on retreat, can take quite a lot of virya. And actually being part of the Sangha, I think, needs virya as well. So probably for some people coming today, took quite a lot of virya, quite a lot of energy to make sure that they got here today so that they could come to the talk. In fact, I can see Emily's nodding, so she must have had a particularly difficult time getting here. But yeah, we need virya for our spiritual life. So I'm going to look first at what virya isn't, so that we can understand it. So there's a wonderful sort of Buddhist idea of concepts having far enemies and near enemies. And obviously the far enemy of virya, energy for the good, is going to be laziness, inertia, just not making any effort at all. It's that kind of, oh God, I can't be bothered kind of thing, where we just can't be bothered to do stuff. And actually, I've been living in a community for about 6 months now, and I would say I often come up against that I really can't be bothered kind of thing. It's like, do I really empty the dishwasher again kind of feeling? We get that here as well, actually. There's plenty of chance of that's at the centre as well, that I can't be bothered feeling. And actually, I do find living in the community is a real practice of going beyond that kind of I can't be bothered feeling, that laziness feeling. So there's a kind of classic form of laziness. But interestingly, in that book I'm talking about by Shantideva, the Bodhicharyavatara, he talks about a different form of laziness. So he calls despair or despondency in the path, a lack of confidence in the path, he calls that laziness as well, which is quite interesting. So if you have like low self-esteem, so you feel like you can't practice, or you feel like, oh, it's just not worth it, I'm not getting anywhere, all those kind of feelings, he says they're lazy, which is interesting. That kind of feeling, I'm just, how can I'm the person in the whole world who won't make any progress in the spiritual path. I can see everybody else is getting a bit kinder, a bit more aware, but I'm so bad that I just can't do it, And actually, I think that is a form of laziness because it stops us from doing anything. And I had experience myself quite recently of this, where something I'd been involved with at the centre didn't quite go how I wanted it to go. It didn't work quite how I wanted it to work. And I went right into a really big self-confidence dip. I'll just let the person come in. Okay, maybe I won't. I'll carry on. So I just went... Yeah. So I was in the middle of saying that I recently was involved in something at the centre, didn't work out how I wanted it to, and my approach, how I responded to that was to go into a big self-confidence dip. And after a few days, I realised that actually that dip of self-confidence, that kind of feeling like I'm rubbish, I can't do anything, what's the point of me doing anything, was a way of getting away, a way of distracting myself from what needed to be done. So actually that feeling of lack of self-confidence was not at all helpful, and it was actually just a distraction. It was a way that I kind of got out of doing what I needed to do, if you see what I mean. So actually, those kind of feelings we have that I'm not good enough or it's not working, the despondency feelings, they're actually a bit of a distraction. They are a form of laziness. And I'll just kind of say a few ways that we might look at that. A lot of people suffer from that, obviously, and a few ways we could look at that. I think the first is to look at the facts. So just to objectively go, okay, well, I'm kind of feeling like I can't ever do anything, I'm really rubbish, I can't make progress. You could look at it and you could go, is that true? Is that really true? If I asked a friend of mine, would they say that I haven't changed since I've been practicing? Do I not experience that actually I can meditate a little bit more than I used to? I'm a little bit more friendly than I used to. So it's looking at the facts and using those to talk to yourself about it. Reflecting that if you don't try, you never will get there. If you don't actually do stuff, well, nothing will ever happen. A bit of advice I really love is to drop our standards. Okay? If in doubt, drop your standards. Apparently somebody asked a famous poet what he did when he didn't feel like writing any poetry anymore, and he said, I dropped my standards. Because actually those ideas of perfection can stop us doing anything, because we think things should be absolutely brilliant or they're not worth doing. But if we drop our standards, then we can just get on with it without worrying too much about whether it's how it is. And we can go back to practices that you can do whatever state of mind you're in. So the first of the perfections that we talked about, the first of these paramitas, these going beyond, is generosity. Generosity. Generosity is such a key Buddhist thing to do. Wherever you are, whoever you are, pretty much, you can be generous, however you're feeling. And generosity can just really break you out of those feelings. And then I think a kind of sort of tough love, self-metta. So tough love, self-metta, I think, is when you just think, well, why am I any different from anybody else, you know? In the book we're talking about, Shantideva says, even gnats and wasps can get enlightened. So if even gnats and wasps and worms can do it, surely we can do it as well. So it's something about, you know, just thinking, well, you know, the Buddha said that all beings can make progress. Why would I be any different from any other beings? If I apply the practice of the Dharma, it will work. Apparently, there's a story that Sangharakshita, who's the founder, the teacher of this Buddhist movement, he went to Rome and he threw like a Roman coin into the fountain there. And, you know, the wish is meant to come true if you throw the coin in. And somebody said to him, so what did you wish for? Did you wish for enlightenment? And he said, no, I didn't wish for enlightenment, because if you practice, you will get enlightened. My faith is that strong, you know, that you will get enlightened. In fact, what he wished for was a few £1 million. So it's just like, you know, his faith was really strong that enlightenment is possible. Okay. So I've been talking for a little bit around the kind of laziness of feeling self-doubt, just lack of self-esteem, all those kind of things. And now I'm going to look at another something that might not look like it's not Virya. It's a near enemy of Virya, which is being very, very busy indeed. Okay, busyness. It's a bit of a thing of modern life, isn't it? You say to someone, how are you? And they go, oh, busy, very busy. Yeah. So there's a Tibetan from about 1,000 years ago, something like that, called Gampopa. And Gampopa said that gross laziness is devoting time to money-making and worldly schemes. Okay? That's gross laziness. Because actually, we're distracting ourselves. Okay? We're distracting ourselves. If what we want to do is practice ethics, practice meditation, practice wisdom, spending all our time making money, rushing about doing stuff is a distraction. And there's something about our lives today where we just seem to get busier and busier. You know, I think we actually, statistically, have far more leisure time than people ever had before, you know, in terms of the planet. It's like we have such a lot of leisure time, but yet we feel that we're really, really busy. It's like we live this life often where we can feel quite strung out. You know, quite strung out. It's just like there's so much, I can feel like there's so much going on in my head. And it's like I end up ricocheting between activity and distraction. And the reason I do that is because my mind is really wound up. So I was thinking about the experience, I've just been on a week's retreat, and the experience I had there, or the experience you might have if you've been out walking all day, maybe if you've been gardening all day, where actually, at the end of, you know, if you've been out walking all day, you're pretty tired at the end, but you can rest in a way with awareness. Do you see what I mean? So you might be physically quite tired, but you might want to sit down and look at the fire or something like that. You know, something that's kind of quite a lot of awareness. But if you've been, well, my experience of when I've been rushing about a lot is I find that I just, I need to distract myself. My mind's so busy that I can't just sit and be. What I need to do is distract myself then with Facebook or something like that, just to kind of get out the state I'm in. And I think there's something about that which is this form of busyness, this enemy, this near enemy to Virya, actually. Because we do need to rest. You know, it's like Virya is really important energy for the good, but part of life is resting. So we need to learn how to rest well and then go back to our lives. I sort of feel sometimes in this kind of weird state of mind that I get into, I'm neither resting nor am I active, if you see what I mean. So there's something about working towards that. And actually, you know, Virya might not look like someone who's very busy. Someone could be lying in a hospital bed and they could be full of Virya, because all that they'd be doing might be working towards the good, might be working towards better mental states. Somebody might be doing nothing. They might just be sitting and looking at a garden, and it might be a Virya thing. Okay, they might be full of energy for the good. And I think there's something kind of in our society, or maybe where we're like, you know, doing nothing is seen as a bit of a kind of not a very good thing to do. I remember I used to work in an office, like an open plan office, And someone I worked with once said to me, "Oh, you have those bits, don't you, where you stop working and you kind of look into space?" And I thought, oh, that's really interesting, because I thought what I was doing was thinking. It's like I'm typing and then I stop and then I think. But to her, that looked like I wasn't working. And I thought, gosh, what an interesting interpretation, that you have to be typing really hard to be actually working. Do you see what I mean? Yeah. So we need to think about busyness in our lives, I think, as it can be a way to get away from what's our experiences, actually, and a way, therefore, not to be able to apply energy for the good. And another near enemy is excessive, forced, willful effort. So this is where we just kind of think, I can will this, I can sit in meditation and I can make myself have amazing experiences, or I can just make myself be really kind to everybody, kind of thing. And actually, we can't do that. We can't grind Virya out artificially. If we could, well, we would. It's like we can't. What we can do is we have to look at the conditions that give rise to feeling Virya, to feeling this energy for the good, and put those into place, and look what gets in the way. So, for instance, busyness might get in the way. We need to look at that and look at the things that give rise to energy and the things that block it. And in some ways, what we're going to be doing in these talks is looking at what gives rise to energy and what blocks it. So what are we trying to do with this practice of becoming a bodhisattva or developing spiritually? Well, what we're trying to do is develop skillful mental states, positive mental states of kindness, love, generosity. And a bodhisattva, I think, would have a flow, would live in a flow of skillful states, positive, very, very blissful mental states. And that's what we're aiming for. So if we're clear what we're aiming for, we can think, what do we need to apply in terms of energy to make it happen? The thing is, though, it's a bit like there is a big difference between trying to do something and actually doing it. That's the trouble, isn't it? So I thought of a kind of metaphor, which is, so we've decided we decided to practice. So let's say we've decided to do something. We've decided to climb up a hill, a big hill. So we decided to go up Kinder Scout, in the Peak District. It's the first time we've ever gone up there. And we've been inspired. We've heard people talking about it, how lovely it is up there. It looks really amazing. You look at it and think, wow, I'd love to go to the top of that. You get the idea that there'd be views and there'd be space. You'd really see the sky. It'd be fantastic up there. So you set off full of enthusiasm, like, I'm going to get to the top of the hill. And then actually it starts to get quite hard. It's a bit boring actually, because you're just plodding uphill and it's really a bit boring, a bit sort of weary and tiresome. You think, oh well, just wander off back into Edale and have a drink instead. So you never get anywhere. Or you decide, you think, I'll go up another path, I'll come back another day and I'll go around another way and I'll come back another path. It'll be much better then. Or you think, oh, I'll just stop and have a bit of a sleep for a little while, just there. Or you think, this path is a bit boring, it's a bit steep, it's a bit kind of, it's a bit of a fixed path. I need to go on a much more creative path, and I'm going to wander off on an interesting path into the heather. And just fall over the cliff or something. But anyway, I'm just going to wander off into the heather. And I'm just going to go on my own way. So there's lots of ways that if we set off to do anything, we can wander off our path. And it's pretty much the same in anything we do. If we decide we want to learn to play the guitar, we decide we want to have a good relationship with somebody, we find that we wander off, we don't have energy for it, we find that things get difficult, we just find that we've lost the inspiration we had at the beginning. And we need to find ways to get back in touch with that inspiration to give us the virya, the energy. So it's a bit like with our spiritual practice, we need to be working towards it something like we want to do it, not just that we think, oh, we have to do it. Okay, so we're going to look at a different number of different ways that we can apply different things to help us develop virya. And the first is quite a traditional one, it's a very traditional one, and it's called the 4 right efforts. The 4 right efforts. So if you like lists and like a very kind of organised way to things, you'll like 4 right efforts. And it looks like people at the back can't see, actually. Anyway, the 4 right efforts. So the 4 right efforts are about developing positive mental states. And there's 2 of them about developing these skillful mental states. So they're about you develop the state and then you maintain it. There are 2 about what to do if you find yourself in a situation when you're having unskillful mental states. So the first is you prevent them arising, and the second is you eradicate any negative mental states you already have. So I'm going to give an example perhaps from the Metta Bhavana. But first I'm just going to say that actually I think, Sangharakshita, the teacher of this Buddhist movement, said that he thinks that a lot of people live in a kind of much lower state of consciousness than they need to. And by that I presume that he means much more full of unhappiness, being a bit miserable, being a bit kind of cross, a bit angry, that kind of stuff, quite negative mental states, the kind of low-level mental states. And we kind of think we have to live with that. And he says we don't, we can apply different ways of being, we can practice, and our mental states can change. It's a bit like we put up with the weather. It's like it rains a lot, and we put up with it. Well, there isn't anything we can do about that, but we can do stuff about our mental weather, actually. We can put ourselves in conditions, and we can practice in a way that our mental states can change. So this is one way that you can do that, by applying these 4 right efforts. And I'm going to use the example of the Metta Bhavana. So how we might work in meditation if we're doing the Metta Bhavana. So I suppose the first thing you need to do, actually, is have awareness, of course, of what your mental states are. That's really important. And if we're going to try and develop positive mental states, skillful mental states in the Metta Bhavana, the first thing we might do is use the traditional ways that we've been taught. So perhaps those phrases. So you might find that if you say, may I be happy, may they be happy, that from that, positive, skillful mental states are arising. So if that works for you, that's great. If it doesn't, you might use images, or you might use images as well. You might use meditate using your breath. There are lots of different ways that we can work in the Metta Bhavana. But what we can do is, if we're thinking, what I am doing is I am developing some positive mental states. And if they start to arise, so if you start to experience a feeling of wishing well, of friendliness, a feeling of warmth, perhaps a feeling of love, what you can then do is allow those, maintain those. So first we develop the positive mental state, the skillful mental state, then we maintain it once we've got it. And for me that can be a feeling of resting in my experience. So if there is a little bit of love or warmth in my experience, really bringing my awareness to it and letting it gradually develop so we can maintain these states. But then we also, in the Metta Bhavana, we'll be working with preventing and eradicating unskillful states, mental states. So for preventing, actually, I thought probably most of the work needs to happen outside meditation. So preventing, for instance, if you've got a person who you're finding difficult, you might think, well, I'm not going to sit in the office and listen to gossip about that person, for instance. That might be a way that you're not going to start telling yourself loads of stories about them. I think a lot of prevention might be outside meditation. And then if in the Metta Bhavana you start to notice that you are starting to tell yourself stories about the person, you're starting to develop dislike, irritation for them, then you can notice that and you can apply effort, Virya, and you can let it go. You can let it go. Now, eradicate sounds a bit strong. It might sound like we're saying repress that mental state, get rid of it, but we're not actually. We're saying be aware of it, acknowledge it, but choose where you put your awareness. Because if you don't put your awareness into that particular mental state, it will start to just fade away. If we let go of the story about the difficult person, take our awareness away from it, it will gradually dissipate. We can label what's going on in our minds and detach from it. So it's about using the antidotes that we've talked about before in different places in the course. And we can also cultivate the opposite. So there are lots of different ways we can work in terms of eradicating our unskillful mental states. And we can do that in meditation, but we can also do that outside meditation. We can apply these 4 right efforts. I think the 4 right efforts work if you've got a particular kind of mind. If you've got quite a logical kind of list type of mind, you might be going, oh, this sounds really great. If you haven't, it might not kind of work to your experience. That's fine. I think that the the great thing about Buddhism is it's got lots of different ways of working, and I'll talk a little bit later about some of those. Okay, so I think for me the reason that the right efforts are great, but they do need quite a high level of awareness. They do need the ability to kind of be aware of what's going on and apply something to it. Sometimes it doesn't seem that simple. And I think there's something about developing Virya, which means that we are gradually developing the skills to do that, to apply that energy, to apply that effort. And I think there's something for me about the difference between trying to do something and doing something. Is quite interesting. So quite a lot of years ago, I went for some counselling, and at one point, the therapist, I think, must have just got a bit sick of me, kind of going, well, I'm trying. And she threw a pen on the ground. I was like, what's going on here? And she said, just pick the pen up. So I just kind of picked the pen up, and I was a bit grumpy. I was thinking, wait, I'm picking up this pen, this is a bit weird. And then she said, no, you didn't try to pick the pen up, you just picked the pen up. And there's something about that different way of being. There's like, we can try all we like, but then there's something where we just do it. And I think developing Virya, developing this energy for the good, is about moving more towards the way we just do it. We don't try really hard anymore, we just do it. But that takes a lot of training and a lot of practice. And, we'll all have had the experience of like, so for instance, you think, maybe I'll stay in tonight and I'll read those notes that I took from a talk the other day, and I'll really get up to date with my kind of my study, my Dharma study or whatever. But you think, I feel really tired actually, and I think what I need to do is watch a film and go to bed or something like that. And then someone rings up and they go, let's go to the cinema. And suddenly you go, I suddenly find I've got loads and loads of energy. And I don't need to go to bed anymore. I'm really happy to go to the cinema. And what we're talking about there, those two different kinds of energy, are called Karma Chanda. Karma Chanda is that energy for going to the cinema. Dharma Chanda is the energy for reading your notes about the talk and kind of, reflecting on your practice and doing some meditation and all that kind of stuff. So, basically we have lots of energy for things we want to do. And we don't have much energy when we don't really want to do things, actually. So, what our task is, as practitioners, is to try and cultivate this heartfelt desire so that we move forward. So we want to try and connect with the Dharma Chanda. We want to try and connect with what we want to do. We want to try and make what we want to do our practice. Acting skillfully, acting ethically, being friendly, meditating. We want to kind of make that what we want to do. So it's how to redirect the energy of the Karma Chanda into the Dharma Chanda. Chanda means desiring, wanting to do something. It's the kind of enthusiasm for doing something. So with Karma Chanda, why do we want to redirect? I suppose the thing about Karma Chanda is actually we're putting our attention into things that will eventually lead to suffering. So what we're going to be doing, it's a bit like you keep drinking salty water in the hope that it will get rid of your thirst, but you're actually just making your thirst worse. So that's because when we look to these things in life outside us to try and make us happier, in the end, they won't properly work for us. Whereas the Dharma Chanda is the skillful, is what will make us happier, make us free in the long run. And we want to put our energy into what will make us feel happy, make us feel free in the long run. So the trouble is that we're quite deluded. It's really hard for us to see the Dharma Chanda. The Karma Chanda looks kind of really exciting, and like it's where we're going to find a lot of fun and happiness. The Dharma Chanda doesn't speak to us so much. And I've kind of wondered about why that is, when I know intellectually that certain things, that meditating every day does make me feel a lot happier, for instance. Why is it so hard to do that sometimes? And I found the story of the fishwife quite helpful there. So the story of the fishwife, and her fish basket, is a really good story. So she's, the fishwife comes into town to sell her fish in the market, and she carries them all in a basket, and she manages to sell all the fish, but it's quite late by the end of the market. And so she says to her friend, the florist, would it be all right if I sleep in your shop tonight so I can go back to my fishing village tomorrow? So I'm going back to my fishing village tomorrow. And the florist says, yes, that's great, but we're very full upstairs, so if you didn't mind sleeping in the flower shop where all the flowers are, you're very welcome to do that. So the fishwife goes to sleep, and in the morning the florist comes down and she says, oh, how did you sleep? How did you get on sleeping in there with all the flowers? And the fishwife goes, well, I tried to sleep, but at first I just couldn't sleep. The smell was just really horrible. So I put my head in my fish basket, and then I managed to get to sleep really easily. And I think we're a bit like that. It's like we've shown the beautiful smell of these flowers, but we're so used to the smell of the fish that that's what we like. And we put ourselves in those places again and again. So it's a bit like what we're used to will drive us in some ways. So our Virya is about overcoming some of that, what you're used to doing. It's about trying to get your head out the fish basket sometimes. So one of the reasons I think why it's so hard to change is because actually we're not driven by our logical thoughts, we're driven by our emotions. We're driven by what's going on under the surface, by our unconscious, quite often our subconscious. And you remember from the intermediate class that there's a couple of images or little stories we tell. We talk about how it's a bit like the conscious bit of us is the rider of a horse who wants to go a certain direction, but the horse, that's our unconscious, is quite clear. It wants to go towards the stable, it wants to get itself like a nice big bag of hay, and it's looking for a really attractive horse as well. It's kind of like that's where those energies are going. And the rider finds it really hard to kind of make the horse go. That's where the horse wants to go. The second image we use quite a lot is that of imagining that ourselves are a bit like, deep down, we're a bit like being in a banqueting hall of some kind of medieval castle. And it's very dark in there, and there are all loads of figures around a huge, great banqueting table. And the figures are all covered in webs, spider webs and dust, and they're kind of sleeping like this, dropping asleep on the table. And those figures are things like a magician, a wizard, a sorceress, a witch, a good witch, those kind of a queen, emperor, empress, those kind of very powerful figures in our unconscious. But because we don't give them anything to feed off, they're asleep a lot of the time. And that means we can't access their energies. So we can't access the Virya that they could give us if we had them working for us. And the way that we need to approach those figures to get them on our side is through things like myth, archetype, story. So the subtitle to this talk is Virya, the Way of the Warrior. The Way of the Warrior. And warrior, well, that doesn't sound very Buddhist, really, does it? Kind of being a bit of a warrior. But it's the archetype of the warrior that we can use to help us have Virya in our lives. And I think whether we're male or female, we have that energy within us. We have that warrior energy within us. And we can use it for the good. And I think if we don't access that warrior, that energy actually, it can lead to depression, I think, because we're kind of trying to keep it down. It can lead to self-hate. I think we can turn it against ourselves. I think that warrior energy, if we're not directing it positively, we can actually use it harmfully against ourselves and, of course, other people as well. But the way that I'm talking about using this warrior energy is the way that it's talked about in the Dhammapada. So the Dhammapada is a collection of sayings that probably come from the Buddha. And one of them is, though one should conquer in battle thousands upon thousands of men, yet he who conquers himself is truly the greatest in battle. So though one should conquer in battle thousands upon thousands of men, yet he who conquers himself is truly the greatest in battle. So the greatest warrior is not the warrior who's out killing thousands and thousands of people in the battle. It's actually the person who can conquer him or herself. It's the person who can overcome our own inner greed, hatred, delusion, and channel our energies. So I think the image of the warrior is really helpful there, the strength of the warrior. And it reminded me of when I was, I think, in my early 20s, before I'd come across Buddhism. I used to do this thing where I pretended I was an Apache warrior, kind of going through the jungle. And actually I was walking along the river in York, so it's very different. But I kind of would do this thing, this exercise, which was like trying to go into my senses, like you would if you were a warrior, going through the jungle. You would need to be really in your senses. You'd be really aware because, if you weren't, someone might come and kill you. It's like you would have to really know what you were seeing, know what you were hearing, know what you were feeling. And I used to use that kind of model of an Apache kind of warrior as something that kind of, I suppose, a bit of an archetypal figure actually. It's a way to be focused, to be present in the moment. And I think it's that focus, particularly in the archetype of the warrior, that we can really use to develop our energy for the good. So you could think about some of the things, if the archetype of the warrior works for you, you could think about some of the things that a warrior would need. They'd need to have clear aims, actually, what they're trying to do. And usually I think a warrior is working on behalf of something that's higher than them, a bigger cause than their own individual life. In fact, they're prepared to give up their own individual life for the cause that they're fighting for. A warrior would need discipline and training. They'd need courage. They'd need awareness in the moment. They'd need this focus of energies, and they'd need power, a sense of power. So I think all of those can be ways that we can see developing this archetype as a way to get in touch with the power and energy, to actually kind of get ambitions on our side. Because actually, if our mission as a warrior is enlightenment for ourselves for the sake of all living beings, that's a pretty cool thing to have as your mission, to kind of think that I'm a warrior following that task, that is what I'm about. So that's why Virya is the way of the warrior. So I've been talking about how we need to get in touch with these emotions. So there's one way is the archetypal, getting in touch with the warrior. Another is to look at the strong emotions. So it's emotions that drive us. Emotions are strong. Let's try and get emotions on our side. And the first way we can do that, I think, is to use the desire that we all have, for beauty. Okay, so beauty, moving towards something beautiful can be such a strong way of motivating ourselves, of getting ourselves energized. And it's that kind of getting ourselves in touch with the desire we have to live in a more beautiful world, to experience how wonderful it could be if people were living lives more in line with the Dharma, the sense we have when we resonate with something higher in the world. And there's actually a word for that called Shraddha, which is sometimes translated as faith, but it's better translated as something like the highest that's within me resonating with what's highest in the universe. So to have that sense of moving towards something really beautiful, that can really drive us. And if we do have experiences when we feel that there's something beautiful going on, it might be when we see somebody else acting really kindly, really bravely. It might be, we might experience it in a ritual or in communication with another person. There's lots of ways we might experience the beautiful. I think it's really good to reflect on that and to spend time remembering it, to recollect it, and to use that as a motivation to want to move forward. Because, we do need to be moving towards something beautiful. Another thing we might want to use as a way to motivate ourselves is our love of others. So we can quite often have, obviously, have very strong love for other people. And if we think how we can benefit other people through the way that we practice, that can often be a way to motivate us. So I know some people who, for instance, they couldn't, meditating would just seem a bit kind of pointless or whatever. But if they think they're doing it for other people, because the way they benefit the people around them, the way they change, and the kind of person they are, it's much more motivating for them. They then really want to meditate. We might, use gratitude. So we might think, I've really benefited from what I've learned in lots of different ways, perhaps spiritually, perhaps lots of other ways. I can use that gratitude to motivate me to do it for other people as well. Another strong emotion we can use is pride, actually. So Shantideva talks quite a lot about how we can use pride to motivate us, which is interesting, isn't it? Because that's kind of quite a negative emotion usually. Pride about somehow being better than other people. It can cut us off from other people. But this kind of pride, I think, is a very healthy pride. It's about the pride of not wanting to let ourselves down, not wanting to let the Buddha down, So sometimes I'll catch myself, I don't know, doing something, and I kind of think, wow, I'm letting myself down now. I've got a sense of pride. I want to be like a lion in the service of the Buddha. And actually, you know, if I find myself kind of mindlessly eating a chocolate biscuit, as I did as I walked down the street earlier, it's a bit like I kind of lost touch with something. I mean, that's not a brilliant example, but there's like losing touch of what you think. You know, if I get cross with somebody on the phone, I kind of think, no, that's not how I would like a daughter of the Buddha to behave. So there's something about we can see ourselves, if it works for us, as being part of the family of the Buddha. And how would we behave if we were in that family? So pride can be a really positive thing to use. We can use very strong emotions like hatred and anger. So we can have hatred for our anger, actually. We can apply dislike and anger to those things that get in the way, to our greed, to our hatred. And we can use that strong emotion to try and get over those, to move away from them. And lastly, I suppose, we can use a really positive thing, which is joy and delight. Because if we don't enjoy the path, what's the point? It's like we really need to be trying as much as we're not trying, actually enjoying our spiritual life. And I think humour is part of that. It's like just enjoying, taking lightly, but yet seriously, what we do. So there's something about having fun, enjoying our practice. And in fact, if we look at where we're aiming with our practice, what we're trying to do is move towards this state of skillful mental states, where there is a bodhisattva would be in a flow of positive mental states. It would be like play. All their life would be like play. There's an image that Shantideva uses, which is that of an elephant plunging into lotus pools, and then playing in the lotus pool, and then plunging into another pool on a hot day. So it's a bit like the life of a bodhisattva would definitely be in service to others, but it would feel like the joy of an elephant playing in a lotus pool. So there's something about that lila, that play, that we're moving towards. And if we can really bring that warrior energy, that Virya energy into our practice, we will be moving towards that state where we find ourselves, we're just playing in joy and pleasure in those lotus ponds, in our everyday lives, perhaps. So.